Hey everyone, Andeng here for another Ask You Anything. This episode I'm asking how you would revamp LOTRO's PvMP system. Let me know in the comments down below. For me, I've actually been talking with several different people over the last few weeks on how exactly PvMP would be revamped. And I've actually come up with something I think is actually pretty good. The main part of this came from a collaboration with Bloodborne, where we were just listing off one night just all the different things we think PvMP could really improve by, so big thanks to him for helping come up with some of these solutions. So first of all, and I think that this is the biggest thing that would fix PvMP balance in a huge way, is get rid of Freep armor. Now I know that this is incredibly controversial as an idea, but hear me out here. Freeps would still have audacity, they'd just get it the same way creeps do, and, apply it to their character in the same way. They don't need to have all of this armor that changes every single update that will just make things be unbalanced, and then they'll have, harsh swings on creep side to make them be more powerful, or, maybe not as powerful still, but they'll, have this endless cycle of trying to find balance, and it'll never work unless they get a stable environment. And so the easiest way to do that is just to put a debuff or something like that on players to where they cannot have their armor be affecting their stats and stuff like that. This would also allow Freeps to be able to use cosmetics in the Outnumbered, which isn't really that important, but it's a nice perk from that change. The next thing I would do is lock in levels at 100 until another balance pass happens. I personally don't think level changes change things that much, but if it does in any way, I think having that locked in until they can actually go and, balance things and make it be better is a good idea, where that's one more variable that's out of the mix. Now, obviously, after they do all this, it could make stuff incredibly unbalanced unless they rebalance stuff, and so I hope that they, as we go through these different changes, would be rebalancing along the way, and so just take that as a given that rebalancing is happening as each of these steps go on, because that is really important. If they don't rebalance as this happens, then there's no point in making these changes. The next thing I would do is add an Outnumbered buff for every single fortress that is on the map, individually for that fortress. So let's say that you have, one person that you're defending against a ton of people. You still definitely should not be able to defend if there's a huge group coming in, but I think it would be interesting if there was a balance in such a way to where there was a fighting chance, and if they messed up, then you could turn things around with that buff at that particular place. Now there would be a few rules that I would like to see put in place on this. So for example, if your side owns like all the forts, or even like 2/3 of the the fortresses and the outposts, then I think it would be a good idea to not allow you to have the Outnumbered buff, even if you are outnumbered in that place, because if you control all the outposts, then clearly overall you're winning, and so I don't think they need to come into play then. And so I think if you actually added that in, it would make the fortresses be much more important, also because they'd have buffs later on and things like that, and it'd just be much more interesting to be defending them, and players who are, severely outnumbered would actually still consider defending the forts, and I think that would make for much more interesting gameplay. Also, the buff would not just be for the defenders, it would be for the offensive side too. I want to make that be very clear. Whichever side is outbalanced would be getting the buff. If they wanted to make it really complicated, they could even add in ranking into the system and say, if there's this many high ranks versus a few low ranks, then you'd get even more buff and stuff like that. But for now, just keeping it simple with numbers, I think is a good idea. Another thing I think would be cool is having an overall map balance, where if you're outnumbered in the overall map, then you get a buff as being outnumbered, so that you can, fight harder for the defense and things like that. I think would be pretty cool. The next thing I would do is make sure that all forts and outposts increase either infamy or commendations or both, and have the overall forts increase it at a greater amount and the outposts increase it at a lesser amount, so that you have that kind of balance where the fortresses are really, really important. Make them have big enough buffs to where it really does matter, and makes for a much more interesting system where you're really attacking and defending these places quite a bit, and then still having open combat. They could even have like little fields that have similar buffs like that are like the least amount of buffs, to where there's certain open areas that you have to keep defended as well. I think would be pretty cool. The next thing I would do is add in more infamy ranks, both on top of the scale and throughout. The infamy ranks take forever, and so I think subdividing the ranks kind of similar to how they subdivided levels in DDO would be really cool, where they could have all of these different sub-infamy levels that makes you feel like you're having more progression, and so you don't just play right when you're about to reach another rank and the time after where you get to enjoy that extra rank, but instead make it be much more interesting throughout, similar to the leveling process on Landscape for Freep side. The next thing I would do is either completely get rid of the Ranger and the Troll, or make them be much more powerful to where they can really make an impact and be something that you do not want the other side to get. I think it would be much more interesting if there was some type of other mechanic that allowed you to get them, like the old capture the flag type stuff that they had that was actually important back in the day. I think it'd be cool if that's what you use to unlock Trolls and Rangers. I think that would be much more interesting. Another thing I would do is make the new map that they added a few years ago either matter and have stats and things that makes it be important for not only the map itself but also for the Entmores. So adding in, like, if you control a certain lane you get infamy, and if you control certain points along the lane you get extra like commendations and stuff, and make it be similar to how the forts and outposts work in the other map. Or just get rid of the new map altogether, because it's just distracting players away from the main areas of conflict. And so if they're not going to do anything with it, then just take it out altogether. Another thing I think would be cool is adding in either like skirmishes or instances that are fairly short but are, PvP skirmishes and instances where, you go through part of a story at the start and then at the end you have a fight, and whoever wins that fight in the end wins that either instance or skirmish or whatever it ends up being. I think would be fantastic. It could be like 4 versus 4 or some type of size that just makes a lot of sense. And I think that would be just really, really interesting. And what would be cool is the winner of those battles throughout the day, whichever side, Freep or Creep, won the most, would get certain buffs and things like that that they could use in the actual PvP combat on Landscape. So whoever like won the most, and then maybe you get like loot at the end that gives you temporary buffs that you can consume and stuff like that, I think would be really interesting and add just a whole nother dynamic to the whole PvP system. But regardless of if they make any of these changes at all, the most important thing that they absolutely have to do is get things balanced. I think with the things that I propose, that would be the easiest way to make balance possible and make balance be more consistent, where if you keep all the variables fairly close to the same to where there's not much changing at any given point, you can just balance it once and then let it be. And obviously there's going to be changes throughout, but that way you don't have to worry about every single time there's a new update that adds in new armor. Because I think that that is the thing that is hurting PvP the most right now, and why a lot of players aren't staying with it is because it's just not fair right now. Both sides feel like that it's imbalanced throughout. There's never a side that feels like it really is balanced. And in this case, I think it's actually true. There really hasn't been balance for a long time, if ever, in LOTRO. And that's a big issue. In a lot of games, they'll say that, both sides will be complaining about balance, and that'll show that it is balanced. I think in LOTRO, it doesn't, and that's a big problem. And I feel like that the current development team has no idea on how to balance, and they don't have enough resources to be balancing it on a regular enough basis to keep the current system alive. And so I think they need to make a major change like this that simplifies the balancing process drastically, or they need to just not do anything, which is kind of what they're already doing right now. But that's a shame, because there's a lot of players that really enjoy PvP and aren't able to get the full potential out of it, because things are not able to stay balanced, and even if they were to balance things, it'd be unbalanced again in the next update, which has happened repetitively throughout LOTRO's history, which is a real shame. So those are my thoughts on how to revamp the PvP system. Let me know in the comments down below how you would be revamping the PvP system, and maybe you think it's completely broken. Let me know how you would fix the PvP system. Let me know the thing that it would take to get you to either come back to PvP, play PvP more often, or continue to play PvP as much as you do. Let me know in the comments below what you would change to make that happen. So that does bring this episode to a close. Thank everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you again real soon for another Ask You Anything.